Welcome to In the Studio with the stories behind the greatest rockers in history.
Guitar up. 1, 2, 3.
I'm Redbeard, and today in the studio, I'm joined by the voice and guitar of Pink Floyd, David Gilmour, for the latest chapter in his post-Floyd portfolio.
So long sin, au revoir chaos. If there's a heaven, it can wait. So long sin, au revoir chaos. If there's a heaven. The Endless River was a bigger distraction, and it meant I had to down tools, put this whole album away on the shelf for a period of time. I can't remember quite how long. I'd say at least 4 months. You can't do things by half measures. You have to get on with whatever you're going to be doing. And the Endless River had reached a point before the record was even released. I was back hard at work in the studio on this record. David Gilmour, and I'm in the studio with Redbeard for the playing of my new album, Rattle, Lock.
At what point did you realize that your creative relationship with Polly had evolved from her contributing to actually a collaboration together?
I suppose that's been a thing that has been slowly sinking into my poor dull brain for the last 20-something years. But I think I've got it now, and I am better for it, and the work that I produce is better for it. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Well, we call it a solo album, but I mean, she's a big part of it. It's sort of really it's a team effort in many ways. Polly's shares with me everything on the writing of the lyrics, and her views on how the music should be and how the singing should be. She's not as expert as me, but her opinions are always very well worth listening to. The other aspect to the time of the Division Bell was that she didn't want it to be. She didn't want to be outed as a person who had much to do with it, and she was worried about antagonism from fans, that she might be taking part, that my partner might be taking over too much of a role within the whole Pink Floyd thing. But I think they can see now, and we all can see what a great job she does for and with me.
In March of 2006 for On an Island, at the time you told me that the only hesitation had been, and I quote, the public's well-known difficulties with the wives and lovers of well-known men, end quote.
Yeah.
Apparently, you feel, has there been a sea change? Or?
I don't think there's been a sea change in society. I mean, I think there's still an enormous amount of prejudice against all sorts of people, women, people of different sexual orientation, religious. There's the world is rife with prejudice still, and we're deluded if we think it's gone away. But I suspect in this particular rather small, lightweight area of popular music, anyone who knows me and what I do is well up to date on the fact that I have a partner in life and in work that is a big part of me and the work that I do. And I think they've probably mostly accepted it by now, and if they haven't, well, f*** 'em.
Mark Knopfler told me that times change, but people don't.
I think it will take centuries for a lot of the prejudices at the core of people's being to go away. I think we'll get there in the end, but I think the mind moves way ahead of the instinct, or you could what one might call the instinct. I'd call the instinct probably the result of years of being indoctrinated in one way or another, and what we think is our instinct actually is more prejudice. Harmless and very light in most people in most ways, but it's still there.
Are you tired of telling the story how you were inspired for the melody line, or at least the beginning hook? I understand there's a great story there.
It's a thing about a pre-announcement jingle that gets played on train stations in France, and I use the trains in France all the time. Around Europe, I much prefer to travel by train in a nice genteel manner than taking airplanes. So, and every time you're on a station in France, that you'll hear that jingle, dam, bam, ba-dam, before they make an announcement to tell you that your train's late or something like that. So that I recorded on my iPhone and took it home and wrote the track to that, and it was really inspiring. And
I'm told you, in the same spirit at which you did Keep Talking, crediting an advert on British television. Is it true that you're crediting the what are they called, sound designers who actually came up with that note sequence?
Well, I'm not crediting them. They are credited. They created that sound, which was at the heart of inspiring the music that became that song. So it's their right. It's no favor or generosity. It's just they wouldn't have given me permission to use it without having some sort of credit and some sort of payment, of course.
Well, listen, in the music business over the last 20 years, it's been a lot easier to get forgiveness than it has been permission. So you're acting like everybody does this, but I'm sorry, you're being magnanimous when you don't just rip it and put it out there under your own name, because that's really how it's been done for a couple of decades.
I know. I've seen what happens to other people, but a lot of very obvious ones are negotiated and fees are paid. But I know that quite a lot don't do that. But the weight of a giant publishing company is very, very likely to leap on you and sue you if it's going to be big. I have no idea what my record is going to do.
Oh, come on! Everything you do is big.
It would be extremely foolish of me to just not credit and not try to avoid paying for it. I mean, to say nothing of being not fair.
On the first listen to the title song, Rattle That Lock, I must confess that I did not recognize your voice.
Really?
How is it decided to bump the song up into the very top key of your vocal range?
Well, that's one of those strange things I don't think about at the time, I just, music just comes to me, and the first key that it arrives to me in is the one I tend to record it in. I mean, I suppose, and I therefore then try to find a melody that suits me and my voice. But that one sounded like a jolly up-tempo tune. And
now, that elevated key and the toe-tapping tempo, it really contrasts with the weighty, lyrical call to some emotional heavy lifting.
I think they are inspirational. They are saying to people to, not let yourself be beaten down by society, by things that impinge on you, and to stand up for yourself and fight your way out of things.
It is a mature, certainly mature. I mean, we're talking about original sin.
It's couched in terms and words that are related to John Milton's Paradise Lost, but it's about universal themes. It's about the way our world today seems to be, closing in on people a lot. A lot of our freedoms are slowly being eroded by governments, certainly the one over here in the UK. And I think same thing in the States. The increased level of security that the internet and other things have created makes normal, ordinary freedoms feel as if they are being eroded to me and to Polly. And this is a call to fight against that.
Joining us in the studio, the lyricist on Pink Floyd's The Division Bell, The Endless River, and David Gilmour's 2006 solo album On an Island, novelist Polly Samson. The elevated key of David singing in like the most upper parts of his register, and the toe-tapping tempo on Rattle That Lock. The master of that contrast is Paul Simon.
Oh, and Leonard Cohen. You think about a song like Closing Time, with that great kind of little disco kind of thing going on, and then that incredibly serious lyric.
So was this a creative device to address such sober subjects as original sin, to quote, go back to where we blew it?
Yeah, it's a song that was very much. It started with the idea of, having heard the music, I had it very much in mind that I wanted to write a song about people just, shaking a fist at things they didn't agree with, even if they couldn't change it. That sitting apathetically, hating the world is not actually the thing that makes you feel good. The thing that makes you feel good is jumping to your feet and protesting. One day I was, had it in my headphones and I was miles from home, and I suddenly remembered this book 2 of Paradise Lost, where Satan has been expelled from heaven, and it's the book 2 is about his journey to go and, shake his fist at God, and then he gets sort of sidetracked when he sees the earth hanging by a golden chain and decides to go and snoop around there instead. And while I was listening to the music, I suddenly thought, oh, that is what I need. That's where I'm going to find the way to express what I mean. And I ran back to the house and straight into my Milton and sort of read book 2 again and got everything I wanted. Again,
David Gilmour with me. Whether recording a stanza that Polly wrote last night or interpreting a Roger Waters second-person rumination from 40 years ago on Wish You Were Here, it occurred to me that you've, throughout your career, sung the thoughts and the observations of others.
Yeah.
How do you approach that?
It takes thought and it takes concentration. I mean, you have to live and breathe and believe the words you're saying. With most of Roger's very brilliant lyrics, and with Polly's lyrics too, I find that I can do that. I hope that I do it justice. But it is something you do often think about. But, you force yourself to be the person who is using those words as if they were their own. I know I'm only borrowing them. I mean, I've written enough songs with words of my own to know how it's done. So.
Of course. Give me an example, though, where you didn't, on first submission, either understand or agree with the premise. What's the process for making it your own?
It's very difficult to give a real example of something which I couldn't understand or believe in sufficiently. There have been songs where I've said to Roger, I'd just rather not be the singer on this one, and you do it. But most of it has been stuff that I really have shared a belief in. With Roger, there's a lot more agreement on things of that he has written than you might sometimes be led to believe.
Next, David Gilmour, along with lyricist Polly Samson, will share inspiration, retina burned by world events and the universal emotions that bind us all. Found on the new album Rattle That Lock, available now digitally from iTunes and physically now at Amazon. I'm Redbeard. You're in the studio with David Gilmour for Rattle That Lock.
This is David Gilmour, and I'm in the studio with Redbeard for the playing of my new album Rattle That Lock.
I'm really intrigued on just how you first contributed creatively and substantively on the Division Bell. How did that start from?
Oh, well, that wasn't as daunting as it may seem. I was working as a journalist on the Sunday Times, and I was quite I think David and I had been sort of girlfriend and boyfriend for maybe I don't know, 6 months or a year or something. And I had glandular fever, which I think is called Epstein-Barr there, and had, very, very high fevers. And he was going in and jamming with Rick and Nick and Guy, and coming back in the evenings and playing me all these tracks, and then sort of, despairing, saying, "Oh, what am I going to do for lyrics? What do you think would work for this?" And from my sickbed with a temperature of about 106, I would sort of mumble things and didn't sort of notice at first that he was writing them down. And then after a while, he started sort of showing me these things and thinking and saying to me, I think this really works. And having taken a few paracetamol and lowered my temperature, I'd look at it and think, no, I think that really doesn't work, actually. Hang on, give it to me, I'll fiddle with it. And at the time, I didn't imagine that, I'd ever be sort of credited for this stuff. So it didn't feel at all like anything, it just felt like writing, which I've done all my life. And it was at the end of the project, sort of, High Hopes was the last one that we wrote. And yes. David sort of said to me, right, so your credit. And I said, no, don't put me on the album. Because I think in those days, it's 23 years ago. And, it was a more sexist time. And I just imagined, these masses of Pink Floyd fans being up in arms about, a woman daring to write lyrics. I don't think they'd had any sort of female contributions apart from Claire Torrey singing on Great Gig in the Sky.
That's true.
And David said, no, I absolutely insist that you're credited. It's your work. And there'll come a time when you'll thank me for this. And at the time I thought, no, I won't. I'm just going to kind of stick my head above the parapet, and it's going to be awful and shaming, and, everyone's going to hate me. And actually, 23 years later or whatever it is, nothing that bad happened. And I think he was right. I think it's not good to not be credited for the work that you do.
Interesting. At what point did you realize that your creative relationship had evolved from contributing to actually creatively collaborating together?
Sorry, I don't understand what the difference is. I've, writing lyrics in '93 and writing lyrics now, it's all writing to me. It doesn't feel like that much has changed. I mean, we know each other, better now than we did then, but the writing was the same. Okay,
but you must admit that shall we say, the presentation, the publicity and the marketing is 180 degrees from that which it was with the Division Bell, because I got to tell you, I don't know if David's ever shared this with you, but I sat with him and the rest of the band for 2 hours talking about the Division Bell for the world premiere broadcast of that here in North America, and he never mentioned you once.
No, I think that was very much what I really hoped that he would do. I really didn't particularly want to be, part of any sort of recognition then. And I suppose it's, we've done 4 albums now.
Yes.
It is a moment for me to stop sort of blushing and just just get on with it, really. But it was very much that, I think David felt he had to protect me. And, you think back to those days and, things that were said, I can remember Division Bell coming out and, Roger Waters, endlessly being asked what he thought, by troublemakers, and eventually kind of trotting out something that I think then got sort of printed everywhere about, well, how tragic is it to get the girlfriend to write the lyrics? And I kind of, sort of thought then, I just sort of took it and thought that's, a bit weird. But imagine someone saying that now. I mean, things have moved on. I don't think that being, a girlfriend or a wife or being female really precludes anyone from being able to write, to be honest.
Each of your last 2 solo albums have been waylaid in their 11th hours by headline, world-shaking music news. On an Island had the Live 8 Pink Floyd reunion, and
that was a year before, but nearly a year before. That was in the summer of 2005.
Right. And this one had about the same period between The Endless River flood in last fall.
Yeah.
How much of a distraction have those been, and is it more of a distraction for you or us in the media?
I don't remember the Live 8 thing being a major distraction. I mean, it was just taking whatever time off it was, thinking about it, doing a few rehearsals and doing the show. The Endless River was a bigger distraction, It meant I had to down tools, put this whole album away on the shelf for a period of time. I can't remember quite how long. I'd say at least 4 months. You can't do things by half measures. You have to get on with whatever you're going to be doing. And The Endless River had reached a point before the record was even released. I was back hard at work in the studio on this record, practically forgotten its existence by the time it came out.
You're referring to Endless River. Elton John and Bernie Taupin are famous for composing separately in 2 rooms. And Pat Benatar told me that she used to slip her lyric sheets under the door to her husband's music room, her co-writer Neil.
Yeah.
How do you two work?
So it's, on the whole, it's music first. The exception to that was Louder Than Words on the last Pink Floyd album, which was partly because, I felt quite strongly that it should be an instrumental album, and, I think David more or less agreed, but wanted one song as it was going to be the last Pink Floyd album. And I'd been with them at Live 8, and it was a sort of song, an idea that had started there for me. And sort of sitting backstage, in a room with David and Nick and Rick, and this complete lack of any conversation, so that it was almost excruciating, for quite a long time. And also, the same with, David and Nick, and to a certain extent David and Rick. And it just, led me to thinking about this sort of eloquence they have when they're playing music that they really don't have in their, they don't have small talk, they don't have big talk, they don't have talk. And so it was something I jotted down at the time. And so that was the one time when I wrote without a piece of music, because I said to David, I'm going to, try and write something and I'll give it to you. And if there's a piece of music for it, so be it. And if not, never mind. And so I wrote it, and I didn't slip it under the door. I think what happens when I write a lyric is I tend to come bursting into the room, and it's one of the great moments, really. In fact, it's the sort of best moment for me of working with David is when he sort of downs tools and immediately sort of sets up the mic and tries to sing it, and that's always a really, really kind of wonderful moment in the genesis of a song.
It's interesting that you downplayed the Live 8, and yet
8.
Polly surprised me when she said that it inspired, the actual event backstage in the green room actually inspired the lyrics to The Endless River.
The moments where she has been together in a situation with Nick, Rick, Roger and I, and she sees the dynamic between us, albeit in its sort of more dysfunctional phase of the later periods, led her to seeing there are a lot of periods of time when we just sit there and don't really talk. And then suddenly when we stand together and make music together, there's a different sort of magic, a different dynamic that takes over. And that was what inspired that lyric. I couldn't speak for other artists, but our relationship as human beings towards each other has always been dysfunctional. And I think Polly's words for Louder Than Words really captured that in spot on.
One glance or listen to the headlines of today prove that the withering war in the Middle East has spilled over the boundaries and burial grounds of continents in any tongue. This song on Rattle That Lock hit me powerfully the very first time I listened. Polly writes, and you sing, I know that sorrow tastes the same on any tongue.
Yeah.
What life events in the headlines or in your personal experience gave you the confidence to deliver such a powerful thought?
What people are left with after the conflicts that go on, the guilt, the reflections on whether you did the right thing. Is it always right to serve your country in whatever it asks you to do? Can you really think about human beings when you are flying a drone with a joystick from a room in the USA, and the drone that you're flying is, can be taking out innocent people in Afghanistan or somewhere else? I mean, these are all issues that are very, very pertinent in our world today. And I'm very proud to be able to sing Polly's thoughts and to have written a vehicle that suits her thoughts so well in the case of this song, In Any Tongue.
Lyricist on the Rattle That Lock album, Polly Samson, followed by singer David Gilmour. You write and David sings, I know that sorrow tastes the same on any tongue.
Yeah. That was the first line that came to me for the song, actually.
Wow. What life events, and in the headlines or in your personal experience, gave you that insight?
Oh, God, how can we not have that insight?
There is a movement, a very strong, vocal, powerful, loud movement right now in America to reduce anybody who doesn't think like certain Americans to an otherness, to reduce their humanity. And I think this song addresses that.
No, that is entirely what this song is about. I mean, it's about that, and it's about PTSD, and it's about the reasons for war, and it's, trying to do it in a 3-minute song. It's, the choice of the word joystick in that song is quite deliberate as well, which is that the way that video games are used, things like Call of Duty, when soldiers have a lot of time sitting around and playing those games, there is the question of, how desensitizing is that? And so, joystick stands both for the joystick on a console and the joystick on a, army helicopter. Yeah.
Who's the protagonist here? Because the words are delivered in the first person, and I get the feeling maybe these voices that we're hearing, are there several different first-person perspectives?
There are two main voices, which could even be 4 main voices. I didn't want to be very specific about who's returning. I mean, it's in both verses and both choruses. It's a father whose son is returning, with some sort of PTSD, and I didn't want to sort of specify what the war was and which country he was returning to. But the first verse is that the soldier has gone for reasons of patriotism, and the second verse is that the soldier has been gone for reasons of faith. So that could apply, to many situations. I mean, tragically, to most situations.
Mm. And when you write, I hear that mama sounds the same in any tongue.
Yeah.
That is,
that
through
came
all the noise.
From, and I think it was a news story that I squirreled away somewhere, which was this thing of someone had done some sort of research and they found that mama was the word that soldiers most commonly cried out as they died.
We here in England use drones. I imagine every other military nation in the world is using drones these days. There's no anti-American bias to do with that. Here in England, we were a lot of us, myself, Polly included, were very against the war in Iraq all those years ago that our lovely Tony Blair led us into.
Well, for us, it's never ended.
Yeah. Well, these things are never ending. And the rights and wrongs of all those conflicts are never made clear, never made honest and clear to the people who live in either one of those countries that are warring with each other. It's just never going to be the way it's done. True clarity and honesty is not the way the powerful in our nations get to be able to do the things they do. It's done with secrecy.
In any tongue, she writes and you sing, I hear that mama sounds the same in any tongue. Boy, I don't know if I could have sung that without choking up.
Young men who don't really know what they're doing or why they're there are dying in places all over the world and breathing their last words. Many of them saying mama as the last thing they say before they peg out. The world will get better eventually, I imagine.
Still to come, details for David Gilmour's European and North American concert dates. Follow In the Studio on Facebook, on Twitter at Redbeard Rocks, and online at inthestudio.net. And the key to the new album Rattle That Lock is iTunes for digital and Amazon for CD and vinyl. I'm Redbeard. You're in the studio with David Gilmour for Rattle That Lock.
This is David Gilmour, and I'm in the studio with Redbeard for the playing of my new album, Rattle That Lock.
I see by the dedication of your latest novel, The Kindness, that your father passed away in 2013, and please accept my deepest, sincere sympathy for your loss. Have you written anything since?
Since he died?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I think most of the lyrics on this album.
How has this life event affected your writing, your subjects, and your approach to those subjects?
Well, I find it very hard to quantify. I mean, but one thing that's happened is I think I'd already written a song on this album, which was about Rick Wright, and a couple of people would say, well, how can you write David's feelings about Rick Wright? But what they forget is that I knew Rick for 20 years and loved him as too, and so it's not that hard to get into David's head to sort of talk about Rick.
Sure.
It's a song called A Boat
As a
Lies
person.
Waiting, and with that one, when I first wrote it, it was very, very much Rick that I had in mind, and then when my father died, one day I was walking along, and I find it very hard to have simple grief, which involving tears. It's sort of become something else. And I was walking along, and I hadn't really cried since my father had died, and that song came on my iPod into my headphones, and suddenly, even though I'd written the words myself, it became so poignantly about my father and what I felt about him that for the first time I was in tears. And it's sort of like later I thought that's so odd, because I wrote that song, and I wrote that song about Rick, but actually I think it's a song about grief and that hope that you'll hear someone's voice again, quite generally.
Has it been impressed upon you that with all of a terrific writer like Paulie's abilities with language and the skills and the emotion and the profundity, there's still places on Rattle That Lock where my notes I've written where you've played a tortured solo, or it's like you're pouring out on the guitar. Playing goes to a place that's really kind of beyond words. Are you aware of that you have that ability?
No, I'm not allowed to not be aware of it. That's what Polly tells me. That's what she's saying in the words to louder than words. And she always says that I should I should conduct interviews by listening to a question and then playing guitar for the answer, and not bothering with the speaking. Shall we do that? No, I haven't got an amp here. I'm reasonably articulate, but a little slow at getting the words out sometimes.
All European shows sold out in advance?
Yeah.
And all indications are that the demand will exceed supply for the limited North American shows in 2016. Does a musician conceived during the Division Bell tour, mid-90s, have, in the 21st century, any chance of sustaining a 50-year recording career such as you've had?
God knows, I'm not a prophet. It doesn't happen to many people. I'm incredibly fortunate that I can still continue to do what I love doing, and that it is sufficiently liked to keep me in work at this after all these years. I'm thrilled by it all. I have no idea when. I'm sure we just can't imagine. I mean, the fact is something will come up that will, next year, 10 years time, 20 years time, something brilliant will come up, and will be what everyone wants to be listening to for a long, long time.
What I'm wondering is, have you had any discussions about our always on, always connected world, and how it's going to affect creative careers, not just in music, but in publishing, in acting?
It's moving too fast. I mean, I say too fast. It's moving at a speed that we can't comprehend. The possibilities of computers, the internet, and everything are changing our world so fast that we won't know how it will affect us in the long term for years and years and years. I mean, I suspect people will look back in 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, and some of the issues, to do with copyrights, free music, free art, all these things will maybe have been resolved, because it would be a worse world if no one could afford to indulge their creative activities and make a living at it. Good luck.
In hindsight, just how important to your creative musical output of the last 20 plus years, the Division Bell, the 2006 solo album On an Island, the Pink Floyd Coda, The Endless River, and now Rattle That Lock. How important to the last 20 years creatively has been your personal relationship with Polly?
In many more ways than just the musical collaboration, our partnership has given me freedom to explore whatever I want to explore in music. And I just don't feel under any pressure to be a part of anyone else's anything. And I can just blunder on in my own sweet way and make the music that I feel like making and be helped and supported by my wife and partner to the extent that I am. It's a wonderful thing. Without wanting to brag too much, I think that this album is as good as anything I've ever done, to be frank with you. That's just hopefully an impossible, unbiased view. But I'm really, really happy with the way it's gone and the way that my creativity is working at the moment.
Sold out European dates this year and South America in December, as well as select North American cities in 2016, including multiple nights in Los Angeles, Toronto, Chicago, and New York City beginning in March. This is Redbeard in the studio, thanking my guests David Gilmour and Polly Samson. Special thanks to Dos Pablos, Rap, and Losby. In the Studio is written by yours truly, Redbeard, for Bearded Fish Productions, copyright 2015, all rights reserved. Transcription, Jane Carpenter Brunet. Theme song by Andy Timmons. Follow In the Studio on Facebook, on Twitter @RedbeardRocks, and online at inthestudio.net.